party tonight.
Yeah, that's, well, it's the art stuff is over. I'm gonna call this meeting to order at 6:30. I am gonna
Okay.
take notes that are important as we go through. But then tomorrow night, I've already talked to these folks, and I'm gonna be able to see this video on the website to fill in anything I missed. So I'll put the notes together tomorrow night, and we'll see about getting them to Bill. Is kind of what I'm planning on for the notes.
Okay.
All right. And again, Chuck is not here because Chuck got called by his boss at the last minute. He had to do something tonight, covering a meeting of something of that nature. So item number one, approval of the agenda. Before we approve the agenda, I would like to add, yeah, go ahead. If you need extras, Eric?
I didn't bring anything.
Okay.
In fact.
Okay.
I've got the agenda.
Okay. I'd like to add a Roman numeral 9 executive session for personnel reasons. With that edit, I'd like to have the agenda approved as edited.
So moved.
And all in favor?
Aye.
And,
Well, wait.
oh, yes, go ahead.
The minutes that we're approving, is that the correct date, September 13th?
No, and I didn't change it here, so that 13th should be a 10th. You're right. I got the wrong date on that. I just checked that and realized that mistake. With the 2 edits, motion to approve.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that takes care of that piece. Public comment?
Yeah.
Oh,
You have any comment?
I'm gonna have my 6th grandchild.
Congratulations.
very good. Excellent. I didn't bring hard copies of the minutes. They are up on the website. They've been there since the original time. I've gone through them. Others, any questions, concerns, comments?
I gotta abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay, approval of the minutes as presented on the website.
So moved.
All in favor with 1 abstention. 3 in favor. Oops.
Aye.
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 I'm moving through quicker, sorry. And we have 1 abstention, 3 in favor. That's a majority, even if we don't have a full staff here. Public comment again, we all sit there. Correspondence communications, I don't have any.
I didn't see any in the box.
Thank you for looking.
But I will on a regular basis.
I appreciate that. I'm
The
just
courier
doing that
service
stuff.
works for you.
Oh, it's fantastic. All right. Updates, Wyndham Regional.
I can't think of anything that is a note.
Okay.
There have been, I should mention that there have been one meeting, and I think this week there was a follow-up kind of meeting that I actually, the first one of which I apprised you all of, which was having to do with habitat connectivity and forest blocks. There was a guest speaker at the commissioners meeting in October, the last department.
Somebody from like the A&R kind of thing, or what was the?
Yes, it was A&R.
Is that recorded somewhere?
Pardon me?
Is that recorded so you
I
can watch
don't
it?
think so, no.
Well, we've discussed it, we've got it in our plan, that's
Yes.
now in the select board. So at this point, we're feeling still pretty comfortable that we've met, was Act 171?
I think so. It will be a question of how we and select board might implement various portions of connectivity, such as buying easements or encouraging certain links of land that hitch various blocks together, stay as a forested entity so that critters can pass.
Well, it's gonna be talked about later in the meeting because I think everybody knows that we've been asked to give a rationale of our map. And we'll talk about it in depth, but one of the big things is we took the biofinders high priority forest blocks that need that resource. So,
Yeah, another point is that even though we are blanketed with those forest blocks, it doesn't mean that we can't micromanage within them.
True. Yeah, that's gonna be a lot of discussion, I'm guessing, especially in the select board, because there is a lot of concern with our map, and so they really wanna know what does that really mean, and how does that affect them. All right, okay. DRB?
There's been no action since the last meeting. We do have one pending subdivision. It is being warned for December on the Fisher Estate.
Oh, really? Oh, she's breaking that up.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think it'll be a minor.
Okay. Non-controversial from your points of view?
I don't know yet.
We haven't seen any of the details, so.
No, oh, okay. For sale still, or they're breaking it up to sell it in two parcels, or you don't know that piece either?
That
I think
I
it's
don't
been
know.
sold, so I was curious what you're thinking.
I think the for sale down there is basically the farmhouse and maybe some acreage, but this subdivision has to do with the entire estate.
And I don't know if this is stayed on one parcel or multiple, and we don't have to get into it, but there's a lot of land out through there that family owns, so. All right.
But that, on the DRB front, that's the only thing pending.
Okay, thank you very much. How about wastewater? Anything new on that? It's been a couple of months since we've met.
We concluded the water sampling, the water testing for the village pumping ordinance district. Total of 60 wells were tested. Big picture, there was no evidence of fecal contamination, or i.e. septic contamination of wells within the village. There was also no E. coli. There was one well that did test positive, both on the initial and the retest, for bacteriological contaminants. There was no issue with radiological anywhere, and there were some trace elements of inorganic, I think lead and copper in a few of the wells, but not significant.
And so, I mean, from a scientific point of view, you say, well, no impact, no danger, let's move on. But that's obviously not the next step.
Well-
Are they like, look, we got this data, what are you thinking next?
Well, now we're gonna look at the septic situation in the village, examining all the septic systems, looking at the age of each system, when they were put in, what type it was, what modifications or repairs have been made
That
to them.
information's available through
Well,
town, or you gotta do
we're gonna have
resident by
to-
resident?
Yeah, we're gonna have to do some digging. Some of it will be on file in the town offices. Kim and I will be working next Monday, I think, in the vault.
Yeah, there was a big state law change about 20 years ago, and probably
Right.
anything after that is probably
Right.
on file, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then we'll just use resident expertise, within the village from people who have worked on the foundation, who have knowledge of the changes of the systems that have been put in there, because they've done significant work on that front as far as consolidating.
For the survey piece, but it's not my call, it's everybody's call, is, do you have needs and is that something that would be worth considering for your group? Because it's planning grants, and that's, seems to me, I don't know, Eric, you've been on the game longer than I have, appropriate, inappropriate,
I would think it would be appropriate.
if needed. I don't want to force it down your throat if you don't need it.
Right,
but,
okay.
Maybe you go back to and have that discussion and see what the needs are, so we work together.
Okay, we would definitely like to have a representative piece of the survey when it gets done, as far as what the sentiment is regarding at least village water and wastewater systems.
All right, and we'll talk briefly about the survey, not a lot tonight, I'll be honest with you. Anything else about it to that? Or?
And that's it.
I may sound like stepping on a third rail. This is a group I put together called Update Reports, and I have 3 there. Chris, since you're on the select board, you know, I was thinking, should that be a kind of a brief standing monthly thing for communication? Anything you want to tell us important? We got a whole bunch that we're all already aware of, so you don't have to go into that piece. But anything beyond that, we're going to talk a great deal about the town plan, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
thing.
thing.
All right, so I don't want to waste your time and then get redundant unless there's anything else, because we're going to jump into that next.
No,
I
we
think.
can move on.
All right. Anything else? Hey, how are you? Good. Warm outside?
Yes.
Yeah, good. All right. You got a copy? You're all set. All right. We are moving on to unfinished business town plan. I have an agenda here that I put together, and a lot has happened since that was put together. So in general, what I'd like to do is maybe not look so much at the details that I wrote, and we'll start with an update, and maybe Chris can start, I can add in if necessary. I've got some stuff, and the bottom line is we've been given 2 directives which we need to address and figure out how we're going to attack tonight. That is the primary thing. Beyond that, whatever we did.
You're talking about the 2 reports, or?
Yes, in the last meeting, I think I sent them to all of you, right? The 2 directives. One is to do a report, presumably similar to the Wyndham Town report. And the other is a second report explaining how we came up with the mapping for the proposed map. I can call them up on my email. You know what I'm talking about, or?
Yeah, I thought there was another report detailing the changes from the previous.
Right, yeah, I said that's the report I'm talking about, that, as I understood it, they would like us to use the Wyndham Town
Okay.
report to model
Yes, okay.
in terms of a template
Okay.
or format on how we present that. And I think I sent that to everybody, the Wyndham Town report?
Yes, I didn't read it.
Okay, it's basically it's a chapter by chapter summary. Chapter 1, land use looks different than the old chapter because of these things. Well, chapter 2, economy looks different because, and that's the format that they used. So that's all that was. All right.
But we are
Go ahead.
on track for a public hearing on the 15th of December,
12.
or the 12th of December, I'm sorry, because we have a drop dead date of 15 January, that's what comes in.
So this is where I get confused, and I'm gonna ask you,
Uh-huh.
yeah, here we go. All right, so
the
you,
15th is a
the 12th,
Saturday?
I think it's the 12th,
Ah,
yeah, pretty sure it's the 12th.
Well, December 12th is the public.
ah,
2 things. The final public hearing, assuming there is no changes to the town plan, you have the right to change it again at that meeting, but if you do, then you have to warn another meeting the 15 or 30 days, I don't know the time limits, out. That's the concern, because if you do change it, then you're pushing up against the January 15th date,
Right.
which is then,
Then the whole process would have to start over, because we have 1 year.
that's automatic rejection.
Right.
Ends up back in our lap. Which means we can just say, fine, it's back in our lap, we resubmit it, and their clock starts all over again, and we go through that. But then, there's the November 14th town meeting, so how does that fit into all of this?
I'm not sure.
Honestly, I like it. Because if that passes, then, instead of the select board voting after the final hearing on the 12th, then the town votes in an Australian ballot vote. Now, if they vote, then it passes, we go forward. If they vote yes, if they vote no, I guess it ends up back in the PC's lap, as if it got rejected. But I'm not sure of that piece yet.
What if it gets rejected in a town vote?
That's what he's saying.
I think it's
Yeah.
both ways.
Right.
Whether the select board rejects it or the Australian ballot, if it gets to that rejects it,
It comes back to,
it ends up like it's been rejected.
yeah.
That is a clear indication that the world doesn't like it. We gotta figure out what they don't like and make some changes somehow, some way.
So presumably we have to have a hearing to hear from people about why they voted.
We would have
Well,
to,
they're voting on who the approval authority is, whether it's a select board or the town.
Yes, but
That's
then
just
he's
kind of-
saying after that, then they have, if that passes, then they have to vote, and if they vote no, then what do we do? If the townspeople vote no.
and I think
So if the
them
first vote
voting,
is yes, and the second vote is no, the question is what do we do? But I think we can't cross that bridge until, you know,
true.
we,
Is there a time that starts? Like if they approve it, say if the town votes yes.
it doesn't
for
say
it.
that in the motion,
If,
But it should.
but it
It
doesn't.
should say to take place in 2020.
and I know that Bill has been in a lot of communication with the town attorney about this, and I'm sure he understands what's going on, and
But anybody can stand up and make a motion saying what the effective date is at that meeting.
There you go.
Like you make an amendment.
Yeah,
So,
Can you?
absolutely, why not? It is not an Australian ballot at that meeting.
that is not an Australian ballot, it's a ballot
So
on the
anybody
floor.
can modify it from the floor, which had been my original intention long ago to clarify some of this, but I've given up since then.
And if you modify it, can you vote that night, or do you have to warn another?
Yeah,
meeting?
no, because it's a modification, it's an amendment to the original motion. As long as it's relevant to the original motion, you can make any amendment from the floor and vote on the amendment, then you have to vote on the amended motion.
Right. I just know this was a special vote because of the nature of it,
Yes,
changing our charter, if you will.
yes,
Charter.
but it still doesn't, because that one isn't
Okay.
by Australian ballot.
But
you
the
can
process
amend
is the process when it's on the
Yes.
floor.
okay. Fun,
it.
fun.
So, I don't know if this board wants to make a recommendation about when that should go into effect or not. I was just assuming it would go into effect immediately, and I think that's what the people who are,
I'm assuming that as well.
yes. Unless somebody makes a change, otherwise that would be the answer.
Right. Two motions, let me separate them out. One, and I should call them up, I've got them on my phone. Al Sands, seconded, I think by Kathy, is they want a written report or explanation specifically of how our map came to be. And why is it different than the old map?
The proposed land use map.
Correct, the one map that we have control over. So, what I did as, to help us as a reminder, is this is our new map, and I probably have PDFs galore of this thing, but now you got a 17th hard copy of the thing. Everybody got one? All right. This is a cut and paste from our town plan with our land use definitions. I want to point to one very important thing on this text document. This land use definitions came from the Wyndham Regional Commission. And I clearly made this point before because I made a change in this. I want to make it again. Under resource lands, the sentence that says resource lands can be actively worked and used, that had been edited by me. So when I say these are all exactly, these are the same, that is the one change from the Wyndham Regional, is they did not have this piece about resource lands can be actively worked and used. I added that piece to lower the level of restriction
Anxiety and anxiety.
on that, yes.
Yes.
To make it clear, it's your land, you can still log it, but
Sure.
just be aware it's kind of special to the world, you know? And I
Yes, and I
think,
think that should have assuaged most people's concerns.
and I understand, Al, this is the old map, just so you have a reference. My guess is when you look at these two maps, and we got the big green blob, and their green blob is smaller with some darker green blobs in it. Al's question is, why did you add all that green to this resource land? Now, I've not gotten an answer, I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit. I sent an email out. I cannot find definitions for what this means when they say that the white is rural residential. we have a definition from the Wyndham Regional what that means. I don't know what it means, it's not in the text, I couldn't find it anywhere. The only definition is that resource areas are above 1,200 feet, and then they got the darker resource areas above 1,450. Beyond that, I don't know what this stuff means. So one of the things we need to do is a comparison of how this proposal, our new map, will alter the designation and how that will have an impact on things like taxes. Go. Explain me the answer. I told him, I don't know how do you find that answer, folks?
Who said it changes the taxes?
This is the state, this is the document that Bill gave me. The yellow he highlighted and said, this is what the board expects for a report, is that stuff that is highlighted.
So-
Down at the bottom, the first thing I read is municipal tax base, and that changed. I said, how do I find that? He says, make a meeting with the listers and go through that. Then I started really freaking out.
That's what we have a staff person for.
Could be, I don't know if they use all the money that we have left to do that. And it may, that's what this tonight's discussion is about, is legally, December 12th is the due date for this report. All right? I told Bill I would do everything I could to get it to him by December 1st. Because it's not fair to them to have to read that report live while sitting in a hearing trying to figure everything out. I didn't promise them we'd do that, but that's what I'm gonna try to do. So, the question is, this is what, in yellow, this report has to look like. I'm looking for ideas on how to do this.
I don't know that we have any evidence that it does change the long-term cost or benefit to the municipality. I think that's the question they're asking, really. It's not like we're putting something new in there that's gonna cost money.
So I'm gonna ask you a loaded question based on what you just said. The logic is loaded, you ready? What was our intent?
To follow the guidelines from the Wyndham Regional Commission, that was our
Okay.
intent.
All right,
Don't you agree?
Mhm.
That's what started this all up? It wasn't like we sat around and said, oh, we need to make these changes.
right. Did we have any proactive intent to say, you know what? We wanna make some changes, we don't like this?
No.
No, our intent was, mine was, I can only speak for myself, is, I like the way the town is, let's leave everything alone. I mean, it's nice, you know? At the same time, there's a balance where I don't wanna lock everything up and say, no, you can't build a doghouse on your property anymore
Right.
because nothing's gonna change from the 1800s.
Yes.
So,
I don't think anything we did makes that happen. I think you might have to be thoughtful about it, and there are occasions where you might have somebody weighing in on an Act 250 process based on the town plan. But nobody said don't develop it, they just said be thoughtful about it.
so I'm gonna read through this, and it may take a while, that's why I say, I'd like to get this, if we get nothing else done tonight.
Yes, this seems like a very pressing
priority.
thing.
Yeah, we do have to, I will budget a little bit of time for the budget, because between now and the next meeting, the select board expects me to show up with a budget proposal. I've got last year's proposal, I'll show you, and I'll ask you if you want to make changes, add, subtract, what we want to do with that. It shouldn't be 5 minutes, but we've got to have time for that. I'm gonna read. If the proposal would alter the designation of any land area, the report should cover the following points. I will start with a question. Does our proposal alter the land area? And that's why I asked intent. And I might start with, our intent was not to alter the land areas, but maybe it was, I don't know.
I think we're just being in compliance with new regulations and recommendations from the state and the Wyndham Regional Commission. I think we're just trying to meet their guidelines. That's my memory, is that not your memory?
But there were changes from the last map, areas that were white before
Well,
are
they have
now
different names,
green.
I don't know that they're
Well,
total changes.
no, if you,
I see them, but I'm just saying, like,
And-
there's different categories on both of them, so the categories don't match. They weren't gonna match no matter what we
Not
did.
apples to apples, you know.
Well, and here is a data point, I did not make
And
copies.
again, I have no agenda, let me just be clear, I have no agenda here at all,
the question that came up was, you know, why is For example, why is one side of Route 35 resource land, but not the other side?
Yeah.
All the way up to Chester Town Line.
And I'm gonna remind you, because you were in, maybe you weren't, yeah, you were in the meetings, it's been a year ago. This is, and I didn't make copies of it, and I apologize, the blue paper was in the copy machine when I ran it through.
Yeah.
The date is important on this, it's 2014, this is the regional town plan, and I can pass it around, but you will find in the Grafton area, their dark green, light green matches our 2014 map, all right? Biofinder and Act 71 came in, A&R has new data points, has new information, and so this is from the Biofinder's newest data points of the term being high priority interior habitat forest blocks, which is Act 171.
Right.
And so the dark green was again, our cartographer has the magic of the software to do it, was based on that.
But even this was questioned, with the wildlife corridor. It appeared, this is open and they would have to go through the village or below.
Mm-hmm.
And that was questioned, and it's a reasonable question, I think.
And I think, I don't know, but I think part of this is the state and the town, this is a plural, finding the balance between local control and what's best for the state. If there's a corridor that goes right through town, what do we say? No, there's not. That's a data point. That's not a choice by anybody. That's the Lynx and the Cougars choosing that, not us. So do we say, no, we're not gonna allow them to go that way, let's cross it out. That's where it's at. Now, we do have the right to say in this map, you know what? We're gonna say the heck with Act 171, we're gonna give up all the grants and all that stuff, we're not gonna be regionally approved, but we're not gonna let that green come down in there anymore. We're gonna put up some barbed wire fence maybe.
I don't think it's people resisting the wildlife coming through the village. They just question that that's the primary corridor for wildlife is the village and not anywhere to the northeast of that.
And yeah, I didn't put the maps
No.
together, that's a cut and paste from the Biofinder, that when you got your hand right there.
I'm driving this, every day to school and seeing the wildlife cross, and I know, they're not just crossing in the village.
Yeah, I don't know, I just, this is the map. And again, Jeff Nugent, I think is his last name?
Yes.
It's a software package, so he didn't go in and manually draw any lines. He turned layers on.
Right.
And transferred them down, and that's where that came from.
I suspect you'll find that the A&R data at the very basic level is not terribly accurate, but on a macro level is. And it's up to us to figure out where the actual boundaries should be, based on what we can see and what we can bring in for people that are wildlife biologists. It's obvious that you shouldn't have a dark green point coming right down into the middle of the village. Critters don't like to pass through there. There's a river there, there's
Traffic.
roads, there's people,
Lights.
dogs.
Mhm.
It's just not a place where they're gonna come. So, I think we shouldn't place too much faith in the accuracy of the fine detail from this Biofinder.
And as a reminder, of all the maps we have in life, this one that's the proposed map is the only one that we have control over. But we do have control over it. And if we look at this after a while and say, you know what, let's move that up a half a mile up the hill and make that white and make it village, make it whatever. We have every right to do that. I always ask that we maybe counsel with the WRC to see what they say, and they might say, you know what, bring it down 100 feet. Okay, we can have that discussion. But right now, my plan is to put together something basically that says that, and we've got two different directives. We're kind of off on the second one, and that's fine. I didn't plan on talking about that, but they intertwine kind of thing. At this point, and I don't know that Al particularly will ever vote for the plan as it sits, and I understand that. The select board's plan is to have a hearing, not edit this map, at least that's what you're thinking, and then vote directly after, or are they gonna have the select board has a meeting right after the hearing that night? But it's gonna be that night.
If there are no changes, yeah.
Right, okay. I have said before, you look at the agenda, I have it there, under Roman numeral 6B, timeline. I envision a monthly theme on this adopted plan, so that over a 12-month period, each chapter will be looked at intensely. Chapter 2, the land use chapter,
You're talking for the purpose of amending
that's
this?
a year from now amendment has always been my goal, a year after adoption. Not exactly a year and 5 months, a year, whatever it takes. That one chapter, land use, might somehow, that meeting, be more than just this meeting. And say, you know, we're gonna hold it in the gym and we're gonna advertise it everywhere and saying, this is maybe the most important community meeting, outside town meeting that you should go to. And prep it. We have maps, we're gonna talk about this. Let's have that discussion. So. You're on the select board, you were there in the discussion, I was not. They asked for an explanation of where this came from. You do notice that, you know, we as a group, we started with what I kept calling the crayon map. Remember, I had a crayon drawing, and that's where we voted on that. This is just a pretty version of that. And there is properties, for example, around Red Orchard Road, even though that is all green here, we said anybody's property that's on the road, that line between rural residential and resource will be their property line. And that's kind of the same is true going down Townsend Road and everything else. Those are, for the most part, I believe, property-based lines, and that's kind of why they zigzag and so forth.
But I think Al was, asking why it wasn't the same for his road. Granted, it's not as densely developed.
And I think that was the reason. I asked, this is a planning commission, we're gonna take input from all community members. Al is a community member when he talks about his house, kinds of things, all right? Does anybody have an opinion on that? Should we put on every road? I mean, if you choose Al's road, for God's sakes, you gotta choose everyone, because you don't get more desolate than that, for God's sakes. Should the roads all have that boundary of one piece of property around every road?
I certainly don't object to that.
Okay.
Do you?
That could put property owners at ease as far as their concerns about undue restrictions because they're now in the green.
Now, we gotta be careful, because some of these guys own 10,000 acres, and, they're,
Not
gotta
true.
figure out.
Well, I think you're talking about somebody who has a residence,
Right.
Okay.
so, I think, when you say
If there's a
somebody
house
with
and
residence.
dwelling
Yes,
versus just,
Yes.
production land.
yes,
Or homesteads.
sure, their homestead plus whatever they're actively using as their property boundary, as opposed to, I own 10,000 acres, that's separate from my house.
And that might be something we can easily ask Jeff to do, well, we can do it ourselves, because we have property
Well, he's got the
maps.
software.
Yeah,
Right.
what would that really look like?
That, we pay them tax dollars to do that, so I'm okay.
Because even that, I question when he comes down Townsend Road, as I look at that,
Yes,
that's not property lines.
No.
the-
I can't tell.
Well, you think of, what's the stone ledge, or what's the place you went to? Saturday?
River Ledge.
The River Ledge. That's a lot more property than right along the road. That's like a 250 acre spread back up in there, I think.
Sure, but it
I
may
don't
be
know
all
if this
along,
is
it may be
elevation.
all along the road and not down.
No, because I've seen it goes way back up in there.
So we need an explanation from Lincoln Regional about how they derive this.
Well, I'll check my notes. I can check with them if I don't find the answers. But everything on here was my directive and going down and meeting with Jeff about everything on here. I didn't say and watch him draw every line, but I have all these notes of all of why he decided. He didn't decide anything. I don't want that to go in the minutes or anywhere else. It was mine giving him decisions.
Sure, but I don't think your intention was to make the whole right side of Chester Road, the east side white and the, west
And
side
I think
green.
I'm almost positive that was property based.
Even then, I don't think so.
Well, you know what the other thing might have been?
Oh.
Resource definition is 25% grade or more, and that seems to go right up to the 25% grade line.
Could be,
Mhm.
that might be.
The definitions are completely different from 08 to today.
Yes.
But yes,
You
that was
know,
my
so,
point.
and let's look at 08's map and how wrong that is, not how wrong our map is. Take, for example, above Houghtonville, they've got rural residential, everything past Houghtonville Village, and there's nothing, what homes are out there?
Yeah, really,
They've got that all in white.
I
That's
guess they
rural
just did that
residential,
because
and
you
there's
could.
nothing there.
because you could have, I guess.
There
they're thinking.
wasn't even any power there.
Yeah, yeah,
There still isn't any power there. So why is that rural
Where's
residential?
the last house then, before you go up the hill, right? The brick
Yes.
house there, so.
So they've got that designated as a village, but then beyond that, they've got that in white. That shouldn't have been.
And again, we start with, if our task is to explain how they're different, I started with the definitions, and there's no definitions other than the elevation. So I don't know how to explain whether they're the same or not. The lines are similar, as Wells noted, that, you know, that they're very similar. Well, let me go back to this list, see what jumps out. And shout out suggestions of how I approach this. The report should cover the following points. 1, the probable impact of surrounding areas, including the effect of any resulting increase in traffic and the probable impact of overall pattern of land use.
I think there's zero effect on that one.
Yeah, I don't
None?
see where.
Right.
I agree, I just didn't want to be the first to say it. The long-term cost or benefit to the municipality based on consideration of the probable impact on the municipal tax base, the need for public facilities.
None.
For B, none. A, I'm not sure how we determine that, you know, would the
But we have
listers be able to?
Right, that is like a whole separate problem that we have no control over. So I think we could say none planned, none,
Anticipated?
yes.
Number 3, the amount of vacant land which is already subject to the proposed new designation.
Huh?
The amount of vacant land which is already, there's an and, so let me read the whole thing, I guess, it's an A and a B. I stopped halfway through it. The amount of vacant land which is A, already subject to the proposed new designation, and B, actual available for that purpose, and the need for additional land for that purpose. I read the words, I don't know what I said.
Me either.
Good. What does that mean?
Not sure.
This comes from Vermont law. it
Correct.
looks like.
Let's see
So,
what they did.
I don't know who wrote this, but they sure want to be very clear with their words.
On a side note, whoever wrote this, you see there to there? That's one sentence. That one hurt me, it took me like an hour to read that, so, same folks. Does anybody have any idea what number 3 means? The amount of vacant land which is already subject to the proposed new designation and actually available for that purpose, and the need for additional land for that purpose.
Are they talking about what went from white to green?
It's unclear.
That would be my first guess, but I agree with her. I'm
I
not
don't think
clear.
we should be guessing what their intent was. I think we can say, we don't understand the question. But as far as we know, there's no impact. How about
What
that?
I'll do is after this, I'll go meet with Bill and see if he's got any ideas what this means.
Well, or the Wyndham Regional.
And that's maybe,
Both.
yeah.
Probably.
Number 4 has an A, B, and C. The suitability of the area in question for the proposed purpose after consideration of A, appropriate alternative locations, B, alternative use for the area under consideration, and C, probable impact of the proposed change on other areas similarly designated.
It sounds to me like this is more for if you are proposing land to be developed.
Right, we
I
have,
agree.
right.
And I mean, you could just say NA.
I go back to what and you see why I asked the question, what was our intent?
Yes.
And if we continually say our intent is to not increase development.
But it's not to prohibit development,
Right,
just say.
yes.
It's to make people think about what's the effect on wildlife corridors and
Right.
other environmentally sensitive issues.
And
when
comply
they're-
with,
Yes,
you know.
but it's not to
state
stop anybody from
regulations.
using their land or from logging it or from farming it. So I think it's still not applicable unless you, no, make something different.
Well, I'm gonna say this on the camera, to make sure we're clear where I stand and what I understand is going on. When I met with Bill, he was pretty irate, in my opinion, that's a personal opinion, and disagreed because at the public hearing, you may remember, Al said, what if I wanna put in a 300-foot driveway, I won't be able to do it with this new rules? And he said, is that true? And my response was absolutely not true. There is nothing in here that will prevent you from doing that. Now, after I went away, I said, well, I didn't think of the caveat that he wants to put it across a beaver dam, but, you know, there's 100 things that are Act 250 that no matter what we say, is gonna have an impact on.
So it's asking people to be environmentally sensitive, I think that's the point. And
But
other
then I
than
talked to Bill, and Bill said, you were wrong, Dave. This is gonna have that impact, because they're gonna, his opinion was, somebody's gonna wanna do something, it's gonna go to an Act 250 group, and they're gonna read your plan to say you wanted to restrict growth. And I said, well, what if we wrote in the report that was not our intent? Remember my question? He said, oh, well, then that would probably have a bearing on those Act 250 things. So our report actually can be used to help clarify the incredibly complex, multiple pages of verbiage that we had to write to meet everything else. And I'm wondering if we put in this report that the planning commission was to not change anything, to give everybody the freedom, but to understand that the maps have changed because of A&R data, people still have the right to do that.
A&R data and Act 171.
Right, those two together, right?
Yes,
It's
but I think
A&R
that's an
data.
important point,
Right.
because we didn't do it just arbitrarily, we did it to be in compliance with a new regulation or law.
I'm gonna read the last one, because these last two are, the 3 and 4 that I just read are unclear to me. The number 5, the appropriateness of the size and boundaries of the area proposed for the change with respect to the area required for the proposed use, land capability, and existing development in the area.
I think, again, this assumes that we're, designating certain tracks or certain projects or uses when we're not. It's, as Valerie said, we're just complying with the Act 171 and A&R regulations. So it's not like we are deliberately redesignating land for different purposes.
It
And
seems
that's
to
my
me-
understanding.
Go ahead.
Maybe if you included within the definition of, in this case, resource lands, something that actually encompassed our intent, which was not necessarily a development restriction, but a preservation of the wildlife corridors and habitat.
And river buffers, right?
Yeah. And river buffers, stream buffers, I think, are very important to that end. I don't think that what we're looking at with this yellow highlighting applies to our wildlife preservation efforts. But if we put into the definition for the resource land something that tells what we want to restrict within the resource lands, then that allows the other uses to be more freely contemplated by people. Talk about what we want to try to preserve within the resource lands.
Now, are you talking about the report, which is really all we have control over in this phase of the process? We will have the ability to redefine and redo anything during the amendment process once this is adopted.
Right, yeah.
As a reminder, resource lands, which is clearly the controversial area, Chris.
Well, you've also included critical resource areas.
And
And it says right here, they can be actively worked and used. So I think if you just put an asterisk and you know, a footnote and refer to this again, that's gonna, I think, assuage, I don't think people are putting two and two together here. They're looking at this and going, eek, eek, and not going, oh, this says, write in clear English, it can be worked and used.
That's why I put it in there.
Yes, but I just think if we just, it's not just changing it in any substantial way, because remember, we're allowed to like amend it without making substantial changes. If we just say, see definition of rural, of resource lands, I think that's gonna solve everybody's problems. They're concerned about something that they weren't able to match up easily.
That could assuage some of the concerns. Dave, just one admin note, did we reduce this note here down to one line?
You voted to reduce it, correct?
Yes.
I printed this from my files.
Okay.
All right, but yeah.
This map is for planning purposes and general reference only. I think we retained just the last sentence of the verbiage that's printed on here.
As a note, that is a boilerplate that just says it puts on all the maps that are proposed, and so I don't see any reason to cut it short, though. It's not like
Why
fluvial
does anybody
erosion,
want
we
to
gotta
cut it
keep
short?
it in
I don't understand.
there. It's what they wanted. The problem there.
What's the T?
No, I just don't understand the question, like what the problem is.
I don't know either, but I got it all crossed off, so I can't even read it anymore. But that's what they wanted. They wanted the last sentence left.
Again, there was concern about it being overly restrictive. That was the driving concern.
But it's still part of the town plan.
It is, yeah.
So why do you take that out?
I think the feeling was it was less restrictive without.
No, disagree. Keep that whole thing right there. It's worded well.
Well, show up on Thursday, because this is out of our hands, it's in their hands, and,
Glad you brought that up, Chris.
I forgot that they waited that out on the newer.
Was that at the
copy.
second meeting? I don't remember coming up with
Yeah.
it first, I couldn't get to, I
Yeah.
couldn't make it.
The last meeting.
Correct, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
there
was
was-
really the only contentious thing in the last meeting, wasn't
I
it?
just don't get why it's contentious.
I don't remember it
I-
being a big
I'm not
discussion.
dismissing anybody's
It's called
concerns,
hitting
I
higher on the
literally,
hydrant.
it's what?
It's called hitting higher on the hydrant.
That's what we call
What
it.
does that mean?
Just think about it.
What a dumb excuse. So,
Oh dear.
let me refocus what we need to get done.
Okay.
On the two directives, one is an explanation to the select board of how this map was created.
Yes, and I think we've been clear on that. Yes,
I wanna make sure I understand, because I'm gonna put something in writing
Yes.
for these guys. And we will not meet before the December 1 meeting. My hope would be to get something to you at least a couple of days before, say, this is what I'm gonna say in my writing.
December 1.
No, excuse me. December 1 is that artificial date that I set for me to get
Okay,
to the
this-
select board this stuff. December 12th is the legal date.
And we do have one regularly scheduled meeting on the 10th. before
Correct.
the 12th.
Right. Tuesday, we have a regular meeting, the hearing is on the 12th. Exactly right. All right, I think I can do that. I'll include some other maps, resources, that kind of thing.
So can we discuss changing this at all? Or do
We can discuss it, but I wouldn't do it in this meeting because we have no right to. You have the right to go to the hearing on Thursday and make any recommendations, and they have the right to say, hey, Matt's got a good idea, let's do that.
Not
If
this
they do
Thursday.
that, the December 12th meeting,
Yeah.
excuse me, the 12th meeting, they're all Thursdays.
Yeah,
Then they have to rewarn that, and that hearing is no longer the final hearing. They gotta have another hearing. Once they do that, you're hitting the September 15th date, and it all comes back to us, and we'd have to do it anyways.
Because that question could come up with anyone who lives out here,
Yes.
like Al, could say, I want this to be
Mhm.
rural residential.
so
Yes.
maybe we can put in our report that this, how about this, the planning commission is open to modifying the map in the future to include any land that has a homestead on it that's along,
Making it
A
rural
road.
residential.
yes.
Not rural resident, whatever the other one is.
Does that seem like that would answer, because it'll be in the minutes, if there's ever an Act 250 hearing, and we could say we'd make that a priority when we're amending the town plan next time. So I don't want anybody to feel like they're being singled out. I think this really did come from data that had nothing to do with where somebody lived, because it doesn't say there's any restriction. I wasn't worried about it.
I am going to say I disagree with that after looking at this all of a sudden.
Yeah, why?
And I'm gonna say, and if they wanna do it, I'm okay with it. I'm gonna say I disagree with it because to honor the definitions, the definition of productive rural is not just that you have a homestead. It's more of an industrial definition that this land has less critters on it, less wildlife on it, and it's used more intensely than the other lands. And when you look at those lands, they are more used over the generations. They've been beaten up more, they've been those kinds of things.
You talking about logging?
What's that?
Logging.
Mostly logging. As you know, you get up into that area, there's a crap load of rock walls up in there, so it was full clear cut back in 1900, obviously.
Yeah.
So the soil's been turned 1,000 times, and versus these other lands, according to Biofinder, they've not been used for agriculture over and over again. Mostly because it's crappy land for agriculture. It's steep, rocky hills.
Yeah.
All of that said, if the select board wants to put the corridors and widen that and call it productive rural, I can't see how it has a real negative impact on what I envision this town being. So.
No.
But they just questioned the black-white separation
Yes.
here, which is pretty
Yeah.
clear cut. And then Joe is also questioning, this area behind his house that is all, very steep slope. It's not really usable for
That's,
much of anything productive.
and that was pure that. No other thought than, well, it's that. So.
But that said, with the advent of all our equipment, 30 years ago, we couldn't be building what we're building now. So 30 years from now, with the electric excavator, who knows where it can go?
Yes.
And be creating productive land.
We got a house up on Fisher Hill that 10 years, 15 years ago, we would have bet $100 nobody could ever build on. That's a heck of a driveway they put in there, but good equipment, they make it happen.
Did you catch the electric excavator?
So
Did you catch the electric excavator?
got every word of it.
There's just gonna be an awful lot of pressure to build throughout the lands, and so what we have to do is to provide some foresight as to how we can coexist with wildlife while at the same time accommodating where we have to the increased pressure of people wanting to build. Because that's going to happen. Climate change is going to push people out of the seacoast, and they're going to head north.
Wait, why are they leaving the seacoast?
Because they're getting wet.
Chris Campany has a lot of data that shows, in his opinion, if you know Chris, he runs the Wyndham Regional, that there is over the next, he can't put a time on it, 10 years, almost like a bubble that's going to burst up the I-91 corridor up into Wyndham. He sees it happening down in Greenfield.
Oh, population-wise.
Population-wise,
I
and
thought you
I
meant
think the ocean.
No,
Yeah, I think about water.
No.
I really did, I'm like, what?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, there is economic development happening south of the border,
Uh-huh.
and in his opinion, and that's why every time you talk to him, it's what he talks
It's
about.
already happening.
Yeah.
It goes right up the valley, right into the upper valley.
What's interesting about his vision is, I see it happening, it's evolutionary. He thinks this burst mentality, it's just gonna happen very quickly all of a sudden, and it just keeps coming. Nobody can predict the future.
Either way, nobody's saying they can't build, right?
True.
Right? Nowhere in this definition is anybody saying, if you're white or green, you can't build.
I said it in the meeting, if somebody buys a plot of land up there and wants to put a 300-foot driveway in, I'm hoping there's nothing in here that says they can't. Now, they say a 1,200-foot driveway, you just crossed 1,000 foot, that's Act 250. Now, I'll ask Eric, because you're most experienced in this. Act 250 goes into a place, they're gonna look at this map, right? I wanna put a 1,000, 1,200-foot driveway in.
And Act 250 could come in at any time right now even.
Okay. What impact would our work have on an Act 250 permitting process, let's just say something residential, let's not go near windmills, and that's Act 248
It
anyways.
would have a heavy impact.
And how so? Elaborate.
They come and refer to your town plan
Okay.
when they're making judgments in Act 250.
So how will our town plan affect the PUC or whoever does the Act 250 permitting? You've read it, you've looked at our maps. Think about the old map, you were around when that was designed. How would their reaction be different from the old map to the new map?
They would probably take into account how these definitions that we're using here are used elsewhere in the area, the region, and would make some judgment about what our intent was, whether we expressed it or not, if we're using the same language as what the common parlance is. So that's why I'm saying that if we get the opportunity to add some verbiage to our definitions later on, when we amend this again, we'd ought to talk specifically about what we're trying to accomplish with resource lands.
But right now, that stuff that's white, that everybody's concerned about, right? It's the white part that.
No, it's the green part they're worried about.
Well, but Joe's property is in the white part, that's why I'm confused.
He
questioned that.
Oh.
It's almost self-inconsistent with what we recognize as the terrain around us, and that's why
Well,
I'm
it says
saying.
high value forest, and I assume that somewhere up there, since they've been logging on the other side of that hill, that's high value forest. I'm not sure what he's
Yeah,
concerned
it's
about here.
resource area above 1450, right?
That's the old one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's the ridge he's talking about.
I don't know what
If you
the
look at
elevation
the
is,
topo,
but it's probably close.
it's right there. Where all the lines come close together, that's the steeper contour.
And how do you know that's 1450? How can you read that?
Because it's on this map.
Greened in.
I thought you were reading from this one, I'm like, ooh.
No. If you do
Okay.
this, there it is.
Ah,
Could you look at this for a moment?
yes,
Just so we're all on the same page.
yes.
Eric, I want to, and again, we're not going to be able to change this now, so this is a little bit of something we'll put in our bin for later. But looking at resource land, something that is maybe missing, and I'm thinking the Act 250 permitting, is can the green be developed? Yes or no? That's what they would ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the answer based on our writing?
It says right here, look, future development should be weighed against the desire to preserve the area.
So it's-
That's the
it's
answer
a
to your question.
judgment call.
And who makes that judgment? Them. The Act 250
Yeah, I think-
Council.
Sure,
Yeah.
but taking this document into consideration, and what the wildlife pattern is, and whatever else is the problem there. Like, you know, if you're trying to build on a stream, they're gonna look at that versus, oh, you wanna build, 100 feet away.
So the town
I think it's
plan could be
pretty
the
clear.
first stop on an Act 250 permit, right?
Yep.
So you can stop it here before Act 250 can say, oh, that's okay. They'll look at our
No.
plan and go, no,
We
it's
could,
not
we
okay.
could modify how they would make their judgments, I think, by what we write.
Is there a roadblock here? If somebody is for an Act 250 permit, would they come to our town plan and say, well, that ends that process because this says no?
Yeah, I think so.
You think it does say no?
If we said no,
But are we saying no?
It said resource lands can be actively worked and used.
Yes. And it just says the development should be weighed against the desire to preserve the area.
Yeah, which is not a definitive. which is
Right.
not-
Yeah, so I think it,
You know, here's an edit I'd like to
on
make
the,
to
on
the
the
next.
other hand, look just a little bit higher with your critical resource
Yes.
areas.
Which is a
That's
separate
different.
subject before we leave, I've got to talk about. Al brought up a really good point that I didn't think about on that, but I want to put that in a minute. I'll have a question maybe for the select board, maybe, but for everybody. Multiple part. I'm gonna take the resource lands and make one incredibly minor change. I wanna know how much change it has to the document. Right now it says resource lands can be actively worked and used, but future development should be weighed against desire to preserve the area. Here's my change. I'm simply gonna take out the word but and put a period after the word used. Resource lands can be actively worked and used. Future development should be weighed against desire to preserve the area. And it's different actually in my mind, but
It's
the
not the
same.
same to me, but I'm
It,
okay
it
with
does,
that.
but it's a little stronger saying it's okay to develop. You know, that but develop is almost like a,
It's an
but be
alternative.
very careful about it. And I
It's an
wanna be
alter-
careful.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
It's
a
conditional.
face-off.
Right, and the comma shouldn't be there before but anyway, that's a grammatical error. I'm just wondering, so my question to you is, would they be allowed to change that at the December 12th meeting? It's just that minor change. Would it make anybody happier, and would it prevent it being from being adopted that night?
It would probably make people happier. It's the interpretation, is that a substantial change?
I don't think anybody's gonna
I
say
don't
getting rid of the
think
word
it
but
is.
is gonna be a substantial change.
I
Even I,
don't
who am like,
think
pretty,
either, but given what we've been through.
It's a suggestion I'm making, and if people are okay with it, I'd actually like to email Joe and Al, maybe the whole select board,
Yeah.
all and saying,
Everyone.
you know, maybe I'll do it formally. I'll say, look, you asked for a report on the changes. Here's a report, and include the report. Here's something that might make everybody happier. And that one change is all I can think of. Thoughts?
I'm just wondering if they didn't read it at all, is my, like, they just looked at the map and didn't read the definitions. Because I don't think the but matters, but I don't care if you change it. If you feel better changing it, have at it, from my end.
I'm gonna
Be
start
careful.
with what you're saying is, listen, be
Wait,
clear on what we're talking about here. That it does say development should be weighed, but we're not saying don't develop in these areas.
Right. And what do you,
Well, Eric mentioned look above the critical resource area, read that, and look at the pink over on the new map.
Yes.
Does anyone on the select board, Chris, have issue with the critical resource areas that you're aware of?
Yes, but in a different way than you might be thinking, and I think it's something that needs to be discussed.
like
He
what?
brought up the Lowell Lake situation, that the town plan is written in a way that the state is having a problem developing their own land. And Al said, if you put any of these resource areas in any of state land, you're gonna run into that if somebody wants to fix something at the Turner place, your town plan says they can't do
It doesn't
that.
say you can't fix it, it says you can't develop it. There's a difference to fixing.
What if they
something
wanna
that's
build
already
her old place? Cause right now just the guest house is there. And they say, you know what, we wanna rebuild the restoration of her original dad's
Journeys,
place.
Where are you
Right.
talking about now?
Turner.
Oh.
which isn't even really critical.
Oh, it's not, I thought I made it.
It's on there.
Yeah, just that little section. But the house would be on, in Grafton, not in,
Sorry, I'm not-
yeah. Technically, if that's critical, it's the express desire of the town that no development occurs here. That would tell the Act 250 board that we don't want them doing anything.
Well, I think that's-
Building a walkway out into the swamp, for example. It's a beautiful swamp out there. So, we're not gonna be able to do anything between now and December 12th, but Al brought that up, and I never looked at it from that way. I think it's something at some point that we need to make sure is not a roadblock to some of these things these folks may want in the future, that it brings better things to our town.
Do you think you could put in the report that we're sensitive to the concerns raised by some individuals about lack of development for letting people access and enjoy that property, and that we'll consider modifying that in our next revision?
I don't know if I can or not. It's an interesting point, because the way the report is, it's pretty black and white
Uh-huh.
in terms of,
We could put it in parenthetically. You know?
yeah, I haven't figured out the format of this yet, other than I've read the Wyndham Town report, which was helpful for me. I didn't read it before, and I read it, and yes, it is a nice layout and a nice way to go, so. Too direct, oh, yeah, go ahead.
Question, when you talked with, John Bennett or Chris down there on the regional, did they say anything about, what they consider to be critical resource areas?
No, and in fact, and I do not have the Wyndham Regional Plan here. You'll notice, I don't know if I've got it here, somewhere in our, I gave you one page, so I might not have it here. You notice on the graphic map, it does not have critical resource areas. They do not have a separate bulleted list of critical resource areas, but in the regional town plan, under resource areas, they have a last paragraph saying something in the nature of, although it's not a separate designation, there are areas that are so important that we need to consider making this another designation in the future. So, you know, it's not on theirs. It's a separate one that we added beyond
Okay.
that.
Because I knew the language existed in the plan, but no land was designated that way by Wyndham Regional. And it was.
And it may be that they did not, maybe in the future one, I don't know. Again, that was, my thought when I was thinking this through was a lot of Al and me and everybody else that I talked to is, you know, you look at these 6 designations and really, you know, the 8 designations, we're not a resort center, we're not a large scale, we're not all these other things, so really we only have 3 to choose from. And I felt that if you have 3 to choose from and one is resource, that means that's the most extreme and most strict. And I didn't like that. I wanted that piece that says it's still your land. But I did like saying, you know what, our village park, you know, that's different. You know, we had to talk about the 3 rivers and the 3 streams that go up there, and that is, you know, I'm not a huge environmentalist, but I did a lot of research, and it turns out there is a crap load of unique fauna and birds and bugs and rocks and stuff right along those stream beds that, and on top of that, and this is your area, not mine, you start messing with that and you're dealing with flooding problems all the way down, right? And that was the rationale for those 3. Everything else, as you can see, was just state park, town park, etc. I don't want to get into it too much, but again, my point is, I think Al brought up a really interesting and important point that we need to make sure that we don't restrict people from doing that. Honestly, if we had made those areas, if we made Durant State Forest white, how would that affect how they deal with Durant State Forest? I don't think they're going to go in there and develop it anyways,
No.
so.
No, but I think we don't, I think the town does not want those state lands developed as a rule.
Right.
But I do think that everybody would be okay with allowing improved access to them.
I guess my attitude is, I trust the state. You own the land, you take care of it. Oh, look, I do, I honestly do. You know, the A&R guys want to do what's best. I don't think they're going to put in a big logging road and drop in a house in the middle of it, but they might, I don't know.
I'm skeptical since, although to be fair, it was the feds that were allowing all kinds of ridiculous things to happen in the Green Mountain National Forest. So that has shaken my faith in preservation.
I think I have my marching orders for directive number 2, which is to explain to the select board the rationale and decision-making process for the differences in the old map to the new map. The first directive is to use it doesn't say clearly use the Wyndham model, but as I put in my notes, the fact that they put it in the minutes tells me that's the one they like. Basically, if you've not read it, you don't have to read the whole thing. Its layout is really straightforward, and it starts chapter 1, land use. The old chapter and the new chapter have these changes. This is why we made the changes, and this is why it's important. Chapter 2, historic cultural resources. We made no changes of any significance to chapter 2. Chapter 3, and they go through all that. So, I know you guys have not read this thing for a year, but I'm going to ask this anyways. To the best of your knowledge, think about it a little bit. The land use chapter is going to be a whole piece by itself. We've already discussed that. Any big radical changes on, and again, thinking about the yellow list, did we change anything in the historic, cultural, and natural section that will have an impact on taxes, transportation, all that stuff?
No?
We increased and clarified the number of historic districts, and that stuff.
So that allows people to apply for grants if they ever go visit village village designation, but
Right.
it doesn't change anybody's tax.
But we didn't go in and say, you know, if you own a historic building, we think you should double the taxes on it. We didn't go in and say, let's create a whole zone for recreation or anything like that. The economy, I can't think of anything we changed on that. You know, other than there'll be some redundant statements by me saying, reality has changed in the last 8 or 9 years, so some of our data points have changed, but our goals and our vision has not changed. It's kind of the recurring theme. I'm getting some head nods. Okay. Roads and transportation. Anything in there that jumps to mind? I mean, I'm gonna read the old chapters and the new chapters and go through this again, but I'm hoping to get some input.
It's a lot of work in
Yeah.
a short period of time.
I know. I was in tears when I left Bill's office. I had a crying fit. Is there anything that you can think of? I'll double check, but I'm not thinking of anything radical.
I'm just looking at their examples,
No, okay.
but
So what do I write for the energy chapter?
you say the energy chapter changes reflected the town's vote. I'm just gonna leave it like that.
That's not true though. It's a false statement. It has nothing to do with the town vote. There's nothing in that chapter that has anything to do with the town vote. That chapter was simply cut and paste from the Wyndham Regional template with our data put in.
Except for
We
the
did-
industrial wind, there's somewhere in there, there's some said statement about the industrial wind specifically. It's only those sentences, like 2 sentences.
And I honestly have not read the 2000, whatever year it was. What was the last? 2008 town plan and what the energy chapter said.
That might have been before, that we modified that first, before you were on the board even, it's been so long, I can't remember, honest to goodness.
Well, the energy
It's so
chapter,
long, I forget this thing.
yeah, I'm the guy that wrote the energy chapter, so I'm,
Okay, so you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I did that last November, 2 years ago now.
Okay.
November.
Well, the only thing brought up the other night was just the difference in the figures.
Yeah, those were clerical errors that got corrected.
And that was just clerical, yeah.
For the million times we look through that, and there's still, you're like, you gotta be kidding me, I
Yeah.
can't believe we missed those. It was decimal point stuff, you know, they were spending $8 trillion a year on energy, it was one of the figures or something.
362 million,
Is that what it was? Yeah.
instead of 2.36 million.
God, the number of times we went through this.
Whatever happened to some of the old Dropbox files that were out there? I can't access them anymore.
I'm guessing Chuck eliminated them, because I went in there to grab some stuff 2 weeks ago, and there was only like 5 files
Yeah.
in the town plan.
I
So
thought
all
it was
we
the
got
using
was-
it.
That was my resource for 2 years, and now it's gone.
I discovered that just before I sent that email.
So can he undo that, do you think?
My guess, he's got everything archived everywhere, and I can make sure we ask him about that, yes.
Because that could go back to even the decimal point where we talked about it and had it changed. I remember we talked about other decimal points with Chuck.
Yes, absolutely.
And whether they got changed or not, we don't know. Because you read through it again, you've got it in your mind as one way, and you read through it, and you don't
As
realize the
a
mistakes.
backup, because I've been the holder of the file for quite a while, every change I saved as a new file. I've got many versions of that town plan saved by date for fear that, you know, like, when do we make that change and all that. At some point, I want to eliminate them, but I bet you anything Chuck ever had in that Dropbox, since I've been on board, I've always kept, so.
You deserve a medal.
I'm a pack rat, that's the way I do things, so. So let's be clear what you want me to write on energy chapter. I'd like to start with, this energy chapter was developed from scratch, it was not an edit to the old chapter, and we started with the Wyndham Regional's template that they developed and piloted on 3 other towns.
Okay,
We were given the data source, I have the spreadsheet, and I'll talk about, we just used our data. But your point is important. There were subtle, long discussions to make subtle edits on the template. And so I should go back and find those and make sure that we address them clearly.
that reflected the vote by the town regarding industrial wind.
And I'll read and try and find the citation and say, page 15, chapter 2.
Does that sound
And the
fair?
definition of commercial, industrial, or we spent
Right.
a whole night on that.
Yes,
Yeah, we adopted the definitions in the end from the Wyndham Regional, Marion Major, in her definitions.
Mhm.
Because I remember Lisa had definitions from someplace else for a long time that I don't remember. All right. I'm gonna send a draft out before I submit it to the board and look at some. Education, I guess I'm just gonna write that the facts on the ground are radically changed. Our vision and goal has not, that we continue to want our own elementary school and that kind of stuff.
that sounds fair.
All right. Housing? Yeah.
Does that include senior housing?
It's got a
Yeah.
section in there,
You've
not
got
enough.
throw some senior housing in there.
One of the select board was not happy that we had enough about it. It's in there,
It is in there, they just, weren't aware of it, but it
so
is.
they're happy with it now.
I believe so,
Oh,
once it was
okay.
pointed out that it's already a policy and a goal.
Yeah, right, you talked, you mentioned it the other night, didn't you? In the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I think after this discussion, I might start and look at the table of contents with an introduction, overall blanket statement that says, there's been I'll use prettier terms in my words I'm about to use, but say there's been a massive amount of changes at state law level, Act 171, this, that, energy, on and on and on. Throughout this new plan, we have worked to balance meeting those requirements with meeting the desires and vision of the town, and that's what we try to do. And whether it's, like I say, the energy, education, etc., that's kind of what I'm looking at.
That's perfect, I'm glad you are recording this, you said. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
tomorrow night I'm
Yeah.
gonna go through all this. All right.
'Cause I think that was good language.
Okay, then I'll go with that. Housing will be the same. Recreation, it kind of falls in that same thing. I'm not gonna write a lot. We haven't said we wanna build a ski resort or anything like that.
No, I think we did, if I remember, it's been so long, but talk more about making sure to plan for more pedestrian and bicycle friendly
Okay.
roadways. So I'm pretty sure that was a specific change.
And honestly, and I'll put that in there. I remember discussing that. That's part of our desire for grants and such. By putting it in
Yes.
there, it opens up other opportunities,
Yes.
kinds of stuff. So.
Yes,
And that could be even in that blanket
well, that's
statement
kind
of
of
one of
where
our
I was
big
going with
goals.
it, shouldn't cost the town any money, we didn't require them to do anything, but it allows us to apply for grants.
Town and government services, changes.
Oh, there are factual changes.
But again, the vision, the goals, the overall direction that we want the town to go is not a.
No, no
that's
changes there.
okay. And now I'm gonna stare right at Eric. Chapter 10, flood resiliency. How has that changed from
It's a whole
2008?
new chapter.
Did it exist in 2008 or it didn't even exist? Oh, so I don't have to do a comparison?
Yeah. I think it's
Or
back
you
to your
just-
language.
Oh, that was what I
about
was
we're
afraid
trying-
of. I was like, oh, because that's technical, that is really.
Well, the flood zoning board was in there, the zoning board and what regulations were back then.
Yeah, we didn't have a flood resiliency chapter.
Was there
where
anything
was
about
the-
flood hazard in the old plan?
I don't know.
What drove us to add flood resiliency?
State law.
That's, I thought, but I just want to make sure that that's what I'm talking about. State law dictates we have to have this as a brand new chapter, and we believe it meets verse and letter of the state law.
Yep.
Okay, the last one's Grafton and its neighbors. We've got the same neighbors. We're happy with them. We hope they're happy with us.
We're happier now that the Chester Road is
Isn't that
drivable.
wonderful? That is a wonderful thing.
Makes ours look bad.
Don't start. So there's two documents going out, a little bit of redundancy because of the land use chapter, but the approach is like I just said. We're gonna just a brief sentence or two about most of them, maybe a paragraph or more about a couple, because I gotta go into explanation. The Wyndham one was about a page and a half, 2 pages long.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking at writing a 20-page essay on this. This is the big pieces.
Just over the page.
Just over a page. Okay.
And I hope that assuages some people's concerns about, you know, what was the intent.
And that's one of my goals, is to clarify some of those concerns. Mostly in the report, I might have a cover letter to go with it. I don't know, I haven't thought that through.
They changed the picture, photo on the front.
They did change the photo on the front. Yep. Which, now that it's been changed and we're recording, I'm glad, because I just took that off the internet. For all I know, that's copyrighted somewhere, and I didn't even look it up. So,
Is it our town hall?
well, yeah, I don't know who took that picture. All right, so for town plan, those are the two things we're doing. When we meet in December, it'll be 2 days before the town plan is adopted. My goal is to have a discussion about it, but not move forward with my big goal of starting editing, because I don't think it's appropriate until it's an adopted plan. So the next meeting, I'd like to really make sure that we have the community survey would be the major thing we will talk about. Anything else on the town plan?
You said you're just gonna draft a 4384 report
Yes.
and just email it to us, we don't
To the
require.
planning commission first,
Right,
for your approval that says, yeah, that's what we want it to say. Once I get that, then it's going to the select board.
okay. So you don't think we need to schedule a meeting?
I don't, unless there's
everyone else
confrontation,
confident
there's
that
concern
we
about
Yeah,
that.
if we all disagreed today, I would say we need another meeting, but it sounds like we've all agreed on the language.
Yeah, not that I'm looking for one, but.
I'm just looking for verification that I captured your thoughts correctly, kinds of things.
Okay.
We'll see what we go on that.
And we do have a meeting on the 10th.
Yeah.
It's crunched.
Yeah.
Okay.
Village Center designation update, that's all I have tonight. I went down and had a meeting with Jeff Nugent about the mapping, based on, if you remember, we had, can't remember his name, the guy, Richard Amore came and we walked the town, we laid out the map, he said, it's a little bit big, but he thinks it's okay. So I went down and we went through line by line, all of that.
Great presentation.
What's that?
A great presentation that he gave us,
Yeah.
which I think he should come and talk to the select board about
Yeah,
that.
me too, at some point.
Have
That's a good
another, have
point.
another,
Or
meeting.
even town meeting.
Or even
No, I mean like real town meeting.
yeah,
Yeah, we can talk to him about
it
it,
could
yeah.
take up some time, but the select board needs to hear what he said.
Okay, and we can talk about that with the select board member here, it's a good point. For whatever reason, the people that approve the village centers are not meeting in November or December, their next meeting is January, and so we're in pretty good shape, he's working on that, we don't have a town plan anyways. I've gotta do a little bit of work. Lisa took really, really nice pictures. Jeff looked at all of them and said none of them work. Every one of them is not what they need. Every picture she took was at a building. They were discrete individual buildings. He says they need cities, they need scapes. They need, if you want to highlight the inn, take a shot down the village with the inn in the corner.
Huh.
And I'm like, you're kidding me. So I
How
took,
about that?
I was surprised, I took 95 pictures in one day. I went out there and went,
Oh, you did it already?
yeah, I got all the
Oh, I was
pictures
gonna say, I
taken.
have a lot of town photos.
No, and so I've got to now go with our map and put little arrows and choose which ones, but again, Richard's gonna have the map done by early December, I think is what he's planning on. I'll have these spaces that he'll be ready to put the arrows on. I think he only said about 15 pictures is what he needs, so that's a minor piece. The map will be done, I've gone through the report, I got almost everything together in a folder, we just gotta get the approval. So that's where that's at. Questions on that? Okay. Community survey, my plan a week ago, because I kind of blew it off for a while, was to really focus all of last week to have close to a draft ready for you to have a real discussion about. Not for approval, because I can't believe I can do a draft good enough that you're like, yeah, good enough, leave it at that. But at least good enough that we can have an intelligent discussion about it and work towards finality. I got hit with this other stuff and that went way on the back burner. So my goal is that at the December 10th meeting, that will be the priority and we'll really get close to getting all of the stuff. What are the keys on that? If we'll do, there's stuff in wastewater we want in there, all of that stuff in there, that we can go to the next stage is figuring out format, delivery, if we get approval, is that we want to grant for? It's one of the things I've talked about. If not, What do we do and how do we disseminate that kind of thing? Probably as I'm thinking out loud, we go through some process that say consensus, that's what we want. And then probably be appropriate for me to take it to the select board and say, we're going to do this. What's your input, or not appropriate to take it to them first?
I think it's polite.
That's mostly where I'm at with it. Not required, it's our duty, in fact, as I read it, it's in statute, you can find it. Our job is to survey the community. That's what we're doing. Should we take, at least show them for point of interest, make sure there's no concerns or whatever? My biggest concern honestly is, oh, let's add 37 questions and we don't want that. And then we got a conflict of authority and who really gets to
Yes.
control this, so. But I would like to keep them informed and that we're doing it and get their input kinds of things. So that's that piece.
Are there any questions that they would like to ask?
And maybe I could get hold of them as part of my communication here and say, we're doing this. Here are our big headings. I got some big headings already. What areas are you concerned with? My guess is they're not gonna say anything we haven't seen already. Energy, fluvial erosion, you know, those things are gonna
Jobs.
be, you know.
Economic development.
Yeah. All right. Last thing on my agenda before we go into executive session. This is the document that I sent to the select board a year ago for our FY20 budget. Budgets are July through June.
Yes.
July through June. As a reminder, we do have $2,500. The 600 is now in the DRB's hands.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's, you know, that includes cost of Chuck or and those kinds of stuff. But it could also be if you've got, you know, well, it is just that, it's 24
Yeah.
hours at $25. You guys should be doing your own budget,
Yes.
right? You're on top, you're aware of that, okay.
I'm aware of it, yes.
All right. The quick and simple is you can glance at this and say, yeah, that worked, let's go with it again. Or you can say, boy, let's ask for a new car for everybody on the planning commission, or it's up to you, what do you wanna ask for?
Will there be any costs associated with, the project, wanna do the survey, the village center designation that we can anticipate?
Village center, I saw no costs or no expenses for.
There'll be at least a printing cost for the survey. And then how we disseminate it, you know, if we use mailings, then there'll be additional costs there.
I'm a guy that lives by the saying, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Hoping for the best is that we decide to go for an MPG and we only need 500 to do it. But planning for the worst is that we don't get a grant, we need the grant for something else. So I think it's fiscally responsible to put in this budget that in the next fiscal year, we want to do a survey. And it's gonna cost the town, it's gonna cost how much? 3,000? More, less? And that may sound like a big number, but the reason I choose that is because my goal is to use something like an AmeriCorps Volunteers Committee, because the biggest factor in success in this is less about how well we write it, although that's very important, but how many we get back. And I would like to use the grant, not to write it, we've got that done, but to hire boots on the ground to increase the return rate as high as possible. Maybe hiring a professional company, for example. Cost of printing, we still haven't decided how we're disseminating it. For me, going online and doing a form online is incredibly quick and easy, and the data comes back and I can do really quick charts and graphs. But in my research, I got lots of stuff I can share with you from, mostly from the regional commission and so forth, that doesn't get the most results. The most results is, and it gets more involved than just one thing, and I've got a whole list, they have a list of things you should do, is to definitely send it written with a self-addressed stamped envelope included. Well, for each mailing, then you got 2 stamps, 2 envelopes, and there is going to be printing and so on and so forth. Issues that not answered if we go that way is, what if there's 3 people in the house that want to do the survey? And there's a lot of other things that we have to figure out, maybe not tonight though. So,
We just want a round number of what we think.
yeah,
But for the budget, yeah.
We talked a little bit about that last meeting, was, real quick, was like head of household does the survey for the property. And you-
right.
and you-
I don't know if we came to consensus on
No,
that.
but we discussed it a little bit.
Yes.
I believe.
Mhm.
And then there's the individual, resident.
Well, the beauty of electronic is, I can have a question and say, who are you? I'm the homeowner, I live here but don't own, et cetera, and when you click on that, it
Yeah.
will go to one of multiple different questionnaires
So,
based on.
and renter, and then
Right.
then it clicks them to another.
I think I got about
person.
7 different categories,
Yeah.
actually.
That'd be,
I own property but don't live here, I
Yeah.
own a business but don't live here, there's a whole list of
Yeah.
things that go there.
yeah.
The bottom line is, forget about grants, how much money should we ask for with the intention of implementing the survey during the next fiscal year?
How many households are there? I mean, how many residents are there?
300 dwellings? It's in the town plan.
Yes.
It's under housing.
Where were we with our budget here? Even though we designated this amount, where's our
Good question.
financial statement for right now?
I asked that for Kim this morning, I should have asked last week, she's like,
319.
how much?
319.
319. To answer your question, where we're at right now,
Households.
Okay.
I don't know specifically on the planning administrator wages, because he's got about 2 months still to turn in, but he doesn't use all of 56 hours, I don't think that's a problem. The municipal planning grant, $500, we can't do that without an adopted plan. That said, I'll ask Garrett, maybe you know this. There's a deadline for October 1 each year to get your grants in for the MPG. Now, when can you start putting it? In other words, if we were to put in a grant in January, is the money available?
I don't think so.
That's what I was afraid of, because it's this fiscal year. Ends May 30th or June 30th, excuse me. The idea is use $500 to get one grant this fiscal year, and then put it in again and get another grant next year. Otherwise, that $500 will not be used for a matching portion of a municipal planning grant. So, and I really, from what your answer is, we're probably not gonna use we will not be able to get a municipal planning grant between now and June 30th. Is that accurate in your
I
opinion?
think that's accurate, yeah.
Okay, there's a window or a season of when it's available. So, professional development, I haven't spent any of that, I don't think anybody has, that's in there with the idea that just one conference at $25 a piece, at that time there was 7 of us, would suck it all down. There's been 2 that have come across my desk that I've been interested in, just conflicts didn't go to it.
It'd also be nice if they told you about it more than a couple of weeks ahead of
That
time.
happens a lot, you make a point.
It's so frustrating.
I will say though, that $500 is good through June 30th. And I don't like just spending down and spending tax money, but it is there if something comes up with value and importance. All right, and again, the Roman numeral 2 is off of our plates completely for next year.
Well, so if
Because
there's,
DRB,
what,
it goes to DRB now,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Which, what about Fact TV? Who pays for this?
he does.
Nice guy, what a guy.
It's part of the, it's a convoluted statewide financial system. We do not get charged as a municipality. Part of their mission and requirement is to broadcast and disseminate information like this, if I'm accurate. Yeah. Okay.
so,
So I won't tip you later.
so if you figure that there's
I
going to
have
be
beg
at
for
least
my money
400
already.
surveys, 500 surveys, if you were gonna mail them, and I'm not saying they are, my thought was, that the first line should be, do you want a written, survey? And then, that's the end of the,
Oh, you mean go online?
Yes.
And then
but
click
some people
yes?
aren't gonna do that.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that.
But-
I've even gone to the point that I've talked to Michelle about how can we use the library and her services for
Uh-huh.
those that are afraid of computers to go
Yeah.
down there and help her,
I
you know,
don't
have
think
them
there's that
go
many
through.
people like that anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
So all I was gonna say was something like, well, let's just say there's 400 people for the sake of argument that are gonna possibly need to get a written one, which is a lot, I don't think we need that many. and they need 2 stamps, so that's, essentially $1 a piece out of it, kind of rounding. So, and then you need to still have the thing printed. I don't know what printing costs anymore. Do you?
No, black and white, I'm saying nickel to 7 cents a page, probably.
Kim or Wendy would give us a sense of what they pay.
Well, when you get to copying, there's copying like a big book with a lot of colors, and there's this. We don't have a copy machine that could rip out a couple thousand copies cheaply, or? Because if it's a
How many
multi-page.
pages do you think it's gonna be, like 4?
Well, that's part
So
of
that's
the,
another 20 cents a piece, just say it's 4, for the sake of argument.
I would say that's too big, first of all.
Yeah.
2 pages, front and back, or 4 pieces
No.
of paper?
No, 2 pages front and back.
Okay, all right.
So, but that's still, you're still gonna get charged 20 cents a piece, more or less, right? Just averaging, or
Right.
like ballparking. So if you figure $1.25, just, per person times 400, that still only gets you.
600, somewhere in there.
Or 5.
550, yeah.
So what
This
if,
is, that's just for materials though, now you have to decide whether you're gonna have someone do it or we do it. If Kim does it, we have to, how does that work? Cause we have to budget her to do it, right?
You mean to collect it and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or is that part of it?
That's a roadblock that we need to figure out, and maybe what needs, well, first of all, and I'm keeping really close on the times, I wanna end this, not get into the discussion of the survey, we need to discuss the budget
I'm
right
just
now.
trying to come up with
Yeah.
some
Right, yeah.
rationale.
But if you
for
wanna
it.
But
have
that
that-
December 10th meeting, I'm gonna put some stuff together to get your brains geared up, so when we show up, we'll really dive in and make some decisions on that.
So then if you still need people to walk around or whatever, it sounds like you need at least another $1,000 for that. So no matter how you cut it, you're up to $2,000 or close. So what if we ask for 2,000? The worst that happens is, plus, the other stuff. The worst that happens is somebody cuts it. But if we say specifically, I think that's a reasonable round number for what it's gonna cost. And maybe it'll be a lot less.
What I just heard was Valerie making a proposal to keep the planning commission budget the same, to keep municipal planning grants at 500 because there may be other needs, but to add a one-time $2,000 line item to do this survey. Is that what I heard you make a motion
Yes.
on?
I'll second.
And I heard Matt second it. Discussion.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. And they
At
can mix
least,
it.
at least for the first time
Okay.
through, right?
And it's not like we're gonna survey every year. This is a,
Right, but
once every 8
it'll be the
years.
template for future
That's a
surveys.
big piece of what I hope does happen,
Right.
yeah. You create a baseline, and then you can reuse that again and again. Other discussion? Call for motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? Abstained because you're a select board member, or still thinking?
Abstain.
Fair enough, okay. I will figure out the process and get that information to Joe and the group. He's got 3 or so select board meetings, but they're 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I can't do that, so I may put it in writing, or I may
Yep, that's
actually.
fine.
Okay, all
That
right,
should
it's
be
pretty
fine.
straightforward, you can
Yep.
talk through it if there's any
Sure.
questions, okay. All right,
Well,
yep,
real quick, go back to our administrator, $1,400. That's based on 56 hours?
Yep.
Right?
yeah, and that was just a number that Chuck really came up with.
Okay. Like, he's not here tonight. What nights do we expect him to be here?
Only at the planning commission meetings at this point. That may be a high number, actually, because the town plan is done, we can talk about
Right.
lowering
Do
that.
we lower that?
But he's also supposed to do minutes.
Right?
There is out of work time.
So
So,
he'll do the minutes from the
yeah, so there's,
recording, correct?
yeah, I guess as I think about it, I thought that was high, but if he just goes to 12 meetings and does nothing else, that's 24 hours out of 56 right there. Then you got the minutes. He does do other things. I've had him do research, I've had him do other things, come prepared, and I want statute kind of thing. So it might be a little high, but it's not as high as I thought it was, I guess, as I think about it. Would you like to lower it? I don't care.
No, I think it gives us good wiggle room in case.
Stay high, yeah,
So-
and then we come down, yeah.
Okay.
If we don't spend it, we don't spend it. It's not like it's going in the garbage.
All in favor? budget as proposed with an additional $2,000 for a survey.
Didn't just
Yeah,
vote
we
on that.
just-
Did we? Oh, I thought he brought something up, so I wasn't sure.
No, that's all right.
I wanna vote twice to make sure it's solid. All right. Is there anything else for the agenda before we go into executive session? The next meeting is Tuesday, December 10th, 6:30, here at the town garage. We will now go into executive session. We'll give him a minute to get that shut off, and then we'll, give me a minute to kind of organize my papers.
While you're doing that,